If you don't record these moments, they're gone forever.
Yet the fact he had to travel away and the effort and the cost and everything else involved with travelling away, you don't just go to make the numbers. You go to try and do well, to make it worth your while.
John Watterson spent over half a century documenting Isle of Man sport.
Up until the time I left school, there was virtually no junior sport. There was virtually no women's sport.
It was never about headlines. It was about pride.
It's not the winning, it's the competing, it's the taking part.
An MBE for a lifetime of quiet impact.
Hello humans, welcome to the MBE podcast brought to you by Martin. Today I'm joined by John Watson. Thank you for joining me, John.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Second time up because we had a little technical problem first time around, so we'll repeat some of what we've chatted about, but obviously the listeners haven't heard. So let's start with the MBE, obviously a very special award to receive. Maybe just a synopsis of how you came about that, how you delivered the news, and obviously the experience of collecting it, which I would imagine was pretty immense.
Yeah, it was. It was a big surprise, a lovely surprise as well. And I found out just before the TT and had to keep it quiet for quite some time. And then it was officially announced, and I was absolutely staggered by the response I had. You know, I'm really, you know, all the time people say congratulations, and it's really is quite nice, and I'm really honoured to receive it. So we had a reception here at Government House in October, and then a month later we went to Windsor. And it was a beautiful day, and it was lovely to be at the castle, but also to be presented by William, actually, Prince William. It was a great honour. And we had a good chat about the TT, because he is quite keen on bikes. He rides a bike, motorbike, and I knew he'd been twice. And on one occasion, he was taken around a course in a car at speed with David Mulcreast, a course car. And David had only told me recently that he'd been told beforehand to take it easy. He says, don't forget you've got the future King of England in the car alongside you and blah, blah. So, you know, when he got in the car, or Prince William was already in the car when Dave stepped into it alongside him, and he said, introduced him. And David's father had taken the Duke of Edinburgh around the course on at least one occasion beforehand. Anyway, so it was history repeating itself. So David said, he turns to David and says, nice to meet you. And he said, I suppose you've been told to take it easy in the car with me. And he says, yes, I have. He says, well, don't. He says, just drive as you normally do. And he did. And he said, he loved it. Yeah, he's keen to come back. And he said if he does, he'd bring his youngest lad, Louis, with him, because he likes bikes. And he says, but he'd have to have a chat with them beforehand about the danger of them aspect.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, so yeah, it was great.
Spend the day down there, and I presume you walk around the house with it on the medal.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah. No, we had it on that night. So when we arrived home, it was the awards for excellent night. So I thought I'll leave it on.
Yeah,
I'll put it on,
good.
and it was great.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah.
So on the podcast, we've talked to probably 70, 80 athletes you've met. Certainly Manx wise, hundreds into the thousands. It's probably a question you can't answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Why do we produce so many good athletes here? It's crazy the amount of sports athletes we have here.
Andrew Roach once said to me at the time when Roachy was the leading cyclist here, and he had been for quite some time. Roachy was born in Ireland, and his family moved away to Canada, and he came back at about 14 or 15. But it was well into his 20s when he was riding semi-pro, really. I think he rode with Pinarello and one or two other teams, mostly UK based, but usually on the continent. And he won the Millcross one time, 97, I think it was. But he said to me that it was because of the fact he had to travel away, and the effort and the cost and everything else involved with traveling away, that he says you don't just go to make up the numbers, you go to try and do well, to make it worth your while. And I think that follows in most sports, really. These days, a lot of local athletes, certainly a lot of local cyclists and motorcyclists, rally drivers in their day. You know, I came, when I took over as sports editor in 1990, 87. It's hard to believe now. Nearly 40 years as sports editor. In that period, I've been really fortunate to have known and written about so many people, not just the Mark Cavendishes of this world, and as you know, in cycling, there's been amazing riders here. But I think about car rallying, where you had the Higgins brothers. They were coming through originally as trials riders, and then and the same as Martin Rowe, he was a trials rider. All young kids, and I knew them all from very young age. And then they progressed into a little bit of enduro with Martin. But the Higgins brothers, karts, they were big into karts. The father, Tony, was a rally driver, and he got the boys driving karts. And then that progressed to rallying. And of course, Mark was a multiple British champion, drove world championships for years. David was a production end world champion. Martin Rowe was British champion and also went into world rallying as well for Renault. So those three drivers in particular were world class, all roughly about the same time. Cycling, the list is almost endless, but I can go back to Peter Buckley. Peter Buckley his mother was from Peel. And Peter's grandma lived about a quarter mile away from where we are now, opposite Patrick Church. And Peter, I remember being at his grandma's one day when Peter came in, and I was in awe of him. I didn't know what he did, but I knew he was famous. He was an amateur rider. He just turned pro, but he won Jamaica road race in '66. And I was friendly, best of mates with his cousin, and we were there one day at the little house. We had chickens and hens there, and Peter came in just not long after he'd won the medal, the road race, the only Manxman to have won the Commonwealth Games road race. And
so the UK series used to be called Buckley. Is that's named after him?
Yeah, yeah. So the likes of I think Mike Doyle and Cav and Peter Kenyuk all rode that series, which was named in his. So Peter's father was from Oldham, and although he was born here and his mother's from here, they lived in Oldham really.
Right.
But he had Manx parentage, and so he rode, and it was unfortunate with Peter. He was riding pro because then you had to be pro to ride the Commonwealth Games. Only professionals rode the Olympics, so it was a bit limited. Now everyone can ride the Commonwealth Games, so you get top professionals riding it. They're not. But Peter was training on the Pennines, and he'd gone over into Yorkshire, and unfortunately died when a dog ran in front of him, and he came off. In those days. They weren't wearing helmets, and he died of head injuries, and that was 1968 or 9.
Right, I didn't know that UK series was named after him.
Yeah. He was really well respected. He just turned pro really, and he'd been to the Amateur World Championships, I think, in Mexico, and he'd done pretty well there too. So he was like prime for fame really, for big things. But then not long after that, in fact, at the very same games he won the medal. Nigel Dean was in the team as well, and Nigel went pro, as you probably know. He was pro through virtually all the 70s into the 80s, and then he overlapped then with Mike Doyle and Steve Jochen, and Jockey and Nigel were in the same team when Jockey won the British Championship, and Nigel led him out on
the prom.
No, on the TT on the Clips course.
Yeah.
So it was reverse Clips course, and they were coming out of St Ninians up to the finish. There was a slight rise to the finish line at the grandstand. So Nigel let him out.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a big Manx day. That
some memory bank of in your mind. So we go back to the question around producing so many good athletes here. So a few people have said not only about going away, I suppose what Rochi touches on there about you're not going away to make the numbers, but also that, like I see the kids going away racing and they're on like midnight boats, and it's kind of building resilience, I guess, in not only having to, like we say, make numbers up, but build that resilience to go and do that thing, which just holds them in good stead later in life when I guess adversity comes or the challenges come as they move through the ranks.
Well, if they were going away to a race, for argument's sake, in the UK, it could be anywhere in the UK, but I mean, they'd have to probably leave on the Friday and not come back till the midnight boat on the Sunday, and then go straight to school or whatever, And I think that's been the same for any semi-pros riding today. It's difficult. It's a tough thing. It's not just them either. I know a lot of the motorcycle road racers and motocross riders, enduro riders, and look at the standard in enduro. You've had David Knight as a world champion. You've had the McCanny brothers, who have both been world class and still have been until very recently. And the list goes on. Jed Echel, there's other riders too of all world standard. And cycling, as you know, there's any amount. And it's all, you could say the same for them all. They've all had to come through and not suffer, but, endure the boat crossings or whatever. Not only the cost as well as everything else. And then go back and do a normal job if that's the case, which normally is at the start.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So perhaps, obviously, we were talking about catalogue of names that I'm sure you've got and memories. But perhaps just take us back to your start in journalism and how that began, and was that always the plan for a young Mr. Watterson?
Well, I left probably school a lot earlier than I should have done, but it was a story I can't really go into. But it was just that, I didn't enjoy the last couple of years at St Ninians for one reason or another, and I left. But my parents would only let me leave if I had a decent apprenticeship. And in those days, very few kids of my age. It was boys only at St Ninians at that time, and very few kids went to university. So if you got a trade, you usually take it. And I was fortunate that I had a friend who was the sub-editor at the Isle of Man Examiner, and he got me a start there. But it wasn't the start I wanted. I wanted to go into journalism. There wasn't a vacancy there at that time, but they said there was a vacancy in what they call the comp room, the composing room, which was the makeup side of the newspaper industry. And so he said to me, actually, it's better paid because you get overtime, whereas journalists don't. You're on the salary. So I thought, okay, I'll take it. And so I started in the composing room in 1973 at just 15. So I didn't do any O-levels and nothing at all. I just left at the earliest opportunity. And my education came then working on the newspaper. For the first 2 years, I was what we call copy holding and doing other jobs, but the copy holding was the bulk of the time. And you read every single word of that paper with an experienced former typesetter who had a very good knowledge of the English language and grammar and spelling and everything else, because everything was no auto-check then. And everything was double checked and checked, but we didn't only read the articles and the sports reports in the papers. You read obituaries, you read births, marriages, and deaths notices. You read public notices, you read government notices. The list is endless. You read every single word in that paper. Not only that, we did all government work, and we did all the debate from every Tynwald sitting, bills, and everything. It was just
knowledge going in there.
Yeah. Well, I then my secondary education was virtually all there in that 2, 3, 4 or 5 years that followed. The year I started, only months into my career, was Summerland disaster. And that was the biggest story. Sadly, to say it, but it was the biggest story the Isle of Man's ever had in August 73. And I was working that night, and we just finished the paper, was just going to bed, as they say, going to press. And myself and 2 other apprentices were just ready to go home. And we were waiting around for our bus at the paper. And the news of this fire broke. And so at the time, nobody had mobile phones. they just got hold of it, and we were asked to stay on and work through the night to produce what was a special edition the next day. Obviously very sad, but historical, in that respect. So then my career then did change, not long after, only 2 or 3 years after, actually. A well-known character called Jeff Cannell came to work at the paper. He worked at the Courier previously in Ramsey and the Mourners Herald, and he came to join us, and he took me under his wing, and he was very much motorcycle orientated, and I had an interest in bikes, but he galvanized that, and I became then, I not only started riding motorbikes, but he got me into the writing and photographic side of it. And the other influential person was Bill Dale. Bill Dale, who people know now as the Beach Buddies founder. Bill was a good friend, and we knocked around again together quite a lot. But then we ultimately launched a paper between us called the Isle of Man Gazette in 1985, and Bill and I and Nigel Kernberg were the 3 partners, and we ran that for a couple of years, and then that was incorporated with it more or less morphed into the what is the Manx Independent now. So that was 85, we launched that, and in 87 the Independent came along, and it's a long story, but that's basically what happened. And then that Bill said to me, look, you're good at writing sport, or you've got a good knowledge of sport, how about being sports editor? And I said, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, so sport then, when you talk about journalism as a young kid, it wasn't necessarily in the sports space, it was just journalism in general.
Yeah, I if I'd had the opportunity, I would have gone into it as a general reporter, but there wasn't a vacancy, and I was just so keen to get away from sitting in school, which I did not enjoy, that I took that opportunity, and I thought, well, and it was the right thing to do at the time, and I don't regret it one minute.
And you said then you fell in love with bikes, or your passion for bikes increased.
Motorbikes, yeah. I started riding motorbikes, and my first event was in Boxing Day 1975. Trials. Well, it was enduro actually. I rode first, but it was on a trail bike, and I rode what was a 90-mile event. Finished out of time, but I finished it, and that was always been sort of my thing. Really, I was never a winner, but I get there, and. So trials were great, and then I went into motocross and ultimately rode enduros, beach cross, all those sort of things that still go. But an injury sort of forced me to back off a little bit, and it was then that I did more reporting. And so I started doing Derby reports, road racing reports in 75. Right. The first year they used the airfield. So I've reported every single year on Derby airfield. And I've seen some great riders come through from, your Connor Cummins, Dan Neen, and many others, Dave Molyneux. Knew them all from a very young age coming through. And it's been absolutely, an absolute privilege really to be involved with these people. And as I mentioned, the rally boys before, cycling wise, Steve Jochen and Marie Purvis, as she was, Marie Noon, Marie Morgan now. Great riders in their own right, both British champions, and they were the real trendsetters as far as the new era, and that new era now it's come on to, your Peter Kenyaks, your Johnny Bellises, obviously Mark Cavendish, and Lizzie Holden, and there's so many. The list is endless. Yeah. And I think at one point about 6 years ago, we had somewhere in the region of 11, 12, 13 people earning a living or doing full-time cycling. Yeah. Incredible. It's
great,
incredible. Yeah.
So I'm interested, has Derby ever got warm through those 30 years you've been up there reporting?
It's always been a windy spot.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it?
But I do, I've seen that change a lot as well from the original airfield track, which was 2.5 miles around by the hangars, to what it is now. It's about 1.7 miles, but it's been modified quite a bit. But I've seen some great racing up there. I've seen Joey Dunlop race up around the road circuit, and and many other star names, Steve Hislop and Ian Locker, people like that who came
used to
through.
race to Derby South, I think.
Derby South, the road circuit, that was a road course. That was 4 miles. Same mileage, sort of same distance.
Why did they stop racing there in the end? Just
it lost its sort of license because it was the road surface wasn't fit.
Oh, okay.
It's not much better.
As a cyclist.
It's not much better now.
No.
But if it was, I'd love to see racing back on there. There was talk about it about 7 or 8 years ago, but I've got my doubts now. It was used initially from 1970 until was it 2012, around about that. So it was used for over 40 years, and that was used before the airfield.
And to go back to the trials point earlier, did you end up then in committees and helping on the?
Because again, through my friendship with Jeff, he was secretary of the Ramsey Motorcycle Club, and I joined the committee. I can't know the exact time, but it was early 80s, probably about 84 from memory. And I'm now chairman of that club, and it's an honour to be chairman. And also Alan Killip, who was otherwise known as Kipper Killip, he passed away 3 years ago, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now. And we didn't have a president, and at the recent AGM I was nominated as president, so I will step down as chairman in a year or two's time. And then I'll take on. But that's been interesting as well over the years. We managed to purchase West Cymric, what was an aggregates venue business, and we bought the course in 2008-9 as a club with help from various people, not least David Crane, who I think you might have known from Brown Crane. David was very supportive to us as an individual, great help to us financially. And so we're very proud to have that course now. It's, we've used it, and
where's that on the island?
It's at Bride.
Okay.
And that's been on Boxing Day. We had the biggest sporting event except for the Railway Cup final on Boxing Day. And we've got next year, we've got or into the new year, we've got rounds of the British Enduro Championship. The club is organising in July. So it's quite an onerous task as well. It's a lot to do over the year.
I first met you just through cycling, but have you played football, done other sports, or were they kind of the main things you did? You mentioned you perhaps not always there for winning things, but just taking part, enjoying events.
Yeah, I was a keen footballer. Okay. I didn't play much to standard, and probably I can hold my hands up and say, I was never a great footballer, but I was a very keen footballer. And I trained with Peel Juniors, or Peel, really. We didn't really have a junior team then. The only junior aspect was what they call the Cowell Cup, which is from the 18s, and I was in the squad for that. And we trained then, but Peel was such a strong team, strong side, probably the most successful side of the 1970s. And you had to be exceptional to get in the team. So I was always I trained and I played with the team, but never quite made the grade as a player. But so then at 15, 16, when I got my license, and that was then when I started thinking about motorbikes more.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Doing that, yeah.
Interesting. And to go back to the journalism side, I think you mentioned mid-80s, then you took over the sports editor side of things. Yeah. So it talks a bit about that experience, and then obviously getting to, I guess, go to major events as well and things like that for the Isle of Man. Yeah,
so as I mentioned, really, in that period, sport has grown massively in the Isle of Man. Up until the time I left school, there was virtually no junior sport. There was virtually no women's sport. Mm-hmm. So the only junior sport you had was at school. Women's only the only women's sport there would have been hockey, a little bit of running, a little bit of badminton and that, but not dedicated sport like you are now with football leagues, rugby teams, and so much more. Swimming is very strong now, and every sport I can think of, and then you've got all your martial arts have grown and grown from nothing. I honestly think that in the period I've been in that position, the whole sport, particularly women's and junior sport, has grown phenomenally.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's been marvellous to go from what was very much a senior male orientated sport. And I say senior because very few veterans. I mean, you and I are both veterans and we're both cycling and we both enjoy our cycling. But in my father's day, and my father did cycle, but he would only have cycled pre-war.
Yeah, right.
Once he came back from the war, I don't think the only sport he ever did was pistol shooting or rifle shooting. And the very few men in their 50s or 40s even were competing in sport at a decent standard. And now it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
You get people...
Start younger and go longer.
Absolutely. Kids start at 5 and 6 in sports, like at Dots League and other sporting. Athletics is massive in the Isle of Man. And as I said previously, you only ever did that at school. And you're almost forced into it. And that's probably why the kids didn't enjoy it much. Cross country in the dead of winter when it wasn't the nicest.
That whole leather football.
Yeah, leather football full of mud and laces.
Yeah.
So so that in those 40, 50 years that I've been involved, it's grown massively.
Yeah.
And the Isle of Man has been successful in many, many aspects of sport.
And you mentioned Jeff Cannell earlier. I assume it's the Jeff that did the TT. I'd know the Jeff as the TT side of it. So, maybe talks about some experiences working on the TT. Obviously, it's the event, I think at times us Manxies forget how massive it really is. Kind of on your doorstep can be annoying at times, but the reality is it's just a massive global event on our doorstep. And what's it been like working, reporting on that throughout your career?
Yeah, I have to say, I get quite nervous with the TT, simply because of the danger aspect of it. Lost a lot of friends, and had a lot of friends that badly injured with the TT. But it's become a big part of my life. It still is. I think of many people I've known over the years who've lost their lives at doing what they enjoy and what I've enjoyed being involved with. But at times you do question your connection with the sport when it does end with tragedy. But the TT is a phenomenal event. The history, I've just recently fact-checked a new book which is coming out in the new year on the TT, right from the 1907 to now. And I read through every single word of it again.
Back to the old school.
Back to being 72,000 words. And it took me several weeks. It's been written by a guy called Phil Wayne, who does a lot of work for the TT organisation, but he's based in the UK. And so he asked me, he said, I've done the research, John, but I need somebody who can, with maybe a little bit more wider knowledge of the past, to assist me with it. And so I took it on board, and I was very, I was honoured they asked me, but I enjoyed doing it. And it took me quite a few, months actually, probably a couple of months to do it off. And I'm still working part time for the newspaper, but to do this was most interesting. But it also makes you look at that book here, the TT in camera, and the TT has such a massive history, and I think it's only now that people are really that interest is now coming to people's in focus again, because in the 50s and 60s when the Isle of Man TT was part of the World Championship, it was the biggest event of the year and the biggest event on the calendar. And then it sort of fell into the doldrums in the late 70s and 80s. It has to be said. And I only think that in the last 20 years, the Isle of Man's found its true niche again. And I think it's, if the TT film comes off, which with Brad Pitt, which it does look as if it is going to, I think that will put it back on the international stage again, truly. And I think the global strength of the TT will grow and grow. It's an amazing event with a fantastic history, and I think that's what people at times don't respect, don't realise. But the other thing I think, again, on two wheels is the cycle TT, which, again, I'd like to see a bit more about. It's the 90th anniversary next year of the first cycle TT in 1936. And I've been doing a little bit of research on that, and I'm hoping in the new year to do something more based around that, because I do think that's underestimated as well. I know it's no longer it's no longer lives as an event. It finished in 2003, but for those nearly 70 years, it was again one of the biggest cycle events in the world.
Yeah.
So the Isle of Man's not adverse to running or organising world-class events.
Yeah. So when you talk about Cycle TT, you talk about Cycle Week as a whole, or just that event around the circuit?
Initially, it was just the race.
Yeah.
It was just the Cycle TT. But quite a few Manx riders rode in it. I've got some amazing photographs from those early years. I didn't take them. But I think the Cycle TT was amazing. And then went into the 50s and 60s, when you had, it was a warm-up for the Tour de France. You had the top riders of that time. They were riding on the TT course or riding on events around the island. But also they competed on the track at Onken, which people find hard to believe now. That was it was used for international races.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
The bank track at Onken Stadium.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what races there. The cars that race there. Yeah.
Or stock cars.
Stock cars.
Stock cars. When stock cars started there in around about 64, that period, they could no longer have cycle races on it because they had to put the iron stanchions in on the corners. Of course, it made it too dangerous to have cycle races on it.
Yeah.
I have ridden around it actually.
Okay.
But
raced or ridden?
No, just ridden around it. Yeah, because it was just it was purely a trial thing. There was an idea of trying to possibly resurrect it, but it was never going to happen. There was talk about building a track here, which would be great to see. I still think it would be good to see an oval track here in Ireland. And it very nearly came to fruition, where the Braddon Commissioners Roundhouse is. There was talk about a track there. And I think John Bellis Senior was one of those people involved in the possible founding of that, but it didn't come off.
So just to go back there, we were mentioned Jeff Cannell. I wanted to just go back to that because I remember as a kid listening to him on the radio and abiding memories of the TT. And he was always, you're talking about the history of the TT before. I think it's such an interesting subject that, and he was one where you'd be commentating and just unbelievable amount of information coming out about the history and the racing. And just tell me a bit of memories of Jeff and working with him and knowing him.
Jeff and I were very close, actually. We were very good friends. And he was very much a mentor to me in that respect. He taught me a lot about photography. He taught me a lot about writing in the early days. And he also helped me to learn to ride a bike in off-road. And so all around he was in, and he continued to be a friend right till the day he died, really, which was in 2007. That year we put a book together for the centenary. It was only a small book, really. It was just mostly based on pictures, both his and mine, and other ones we had in our collections, respectively. But then, so people have always said to me, why don't you do a book? Well, I just know that I'd want to do it 100%, and it would probably take me too much time. So I'm happy to have done what I've done in the last 6 months and help assist somebody else put a book together, which I think will be well received and will be a very good publication. I've seen the drafts of it, and like I say, I've been checking it over and doing things. And I think that Phil Wayne's done a good job of it. So that'll be due, I think, about March, April time.
Okay. In
time for the TT, and I think it'll do well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many books on the TT come out over the years, but this will be an overall history of it right from where the word go.
You'd be good to do a sports book, wouldn't you, as well, in the history of Isle of Man sport? Or the book could probably be 10 stories high.
Yeah, it would take me years and years to do it. And I feel that what I've done over the years, I mean, that's the difference with these days with digitalised online coverage of things. You will never be able to go back and look at that hold that in your hand and read now. And it fills me with pride when I go back and look at old. I've recently been doing talks on the history of the Isle of Man newspapers, not Isle of Man newspapers as a company, but the history of Manx newspapers, right from the 1800s right to the current. And I've got some old copies of papers, and I bring them like in files, and I bring them along to the talks, and people are absolutely fascinated. They can't put them down because it's just, you go back to 1983, or it might be the year you were born, or whatever it is, and they want to look through things. And in those days, there was so much of interest in the papers. I'm not saying there is now, but it's limited to what you can report these days. In those days, everything was in, including your divorces, people's wills, property transactions. It was all printed. It was all public knowledge, and obviously many people get divorced, but they don't like to see their names going in the paper and reasons why. But that all went in those days. So the newspapers were very much, that's why they were so popular in that time, right through.
Yeah, it's the communication
right through the last century, really.
How have you found, certainly more recent times, I guess, obviously the evolution of that's totally changing reporting, everything's also instant. Did you find that difficult as your career went on, the change, or were you very much, because the papers do it the way what he does that you're always comfortable
Technically,
with that?
I have struggled in recent years more, so digitally, because I had an awful lot to learn initially, and then almost forget it because it was such a transaction, such a different industry. It became so different, and you had to basically start from scratch. Even though it was the same job, you had to learn it all again. And some aspects are much better, and some are not. But what I was going back to, the original thing with the papers being the historic statements of fact, really, is what I was always told.
Oh, okay.
Was the statement of fact that you have in paper or in a newspaper is basically a book in a weekly fashion. I think it worked out over the 50 years I've been involved, the 52 years now I've been involved in newspapers. I've worked on somewhere in the region of 75,000 papers.
Wow.
And it's a lot of work. It's on average 3 per week per year, and it soon adds up.
I should know. There's still 3 papers on the island now.
Yeah, still 3. Yeah. The Courier, which is free sheet.
We don't get that here,
the
actually.
Manx Independent.
Who do I speak to about that?
It's out in the sticks here, mate. Manx Independent, which I was one of the founding members of that, and the Examiner, which I joined initially in 1973. So I'm still writing for all 3, but mostly the Independent, which has sort of always been a bit my baby and a bit.
I always remember that being certainly the sports.
Yeah, it was more sports oriented.
Sports is the one you wanted to get your name
up to 15 pages of sport at one time. I think now it's still 10 or 11, which is phenomenal. We were part of a larger group in the UK, and you go away to conferences and things like that, and they'd say, it'd be somewhere like, I remember there was a guy there from the Norfolk area, sort of Norfolk Broads, and he worked on paper there, and they want you to talk about your own newspapers where you worked and what it consisted of, and it might have been just a sports writers course I was on. And when I mentioned that one paper alone had 15 pages of sport, they looked at me as if I'd just gone 2 heads, because they couldn't believe they were averaging 4 to 5 pages of sport per week. Mm-hmm. We were doing 15 in one paper, and I was doing another 10 in the Examiner and 4 in the Courier. So it averaged out to somewhere in the region of 30 pages of sport a week. They were doing on average about 4 per week. And the biggest, and then they say, what is your biggest event? And I'd say, well, Isle of Man TT, international event, or, whatever else, events that were on here, which were, the international rallies were big events then as well. And, and this guy's, the biggest event in his calendar year was the World Fly Fishing Competitions. I just thought, wow, we are so
lucky.
We are so lucky here to have the quality of events for such a small island. The amount of clubs here, football clubs, rugby clubs, hockey clubs, swimming clubs, athletic clubs, all vibrant and all extremely popular for a population of 85,000 people. And that is a town of about the size of Shrewsbury.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
you
crazy,
tell me
isn't
how many football clubs they've got in Shrewsbury.
yeah.
You know, and how many swimming clubs and how many, you know, the facilities, the standard. You know, when we do the Ireland Games, I know you've been involved. And the first time I went to the Ireland Games in Gibraltar '95, you were there, and that's when we got to know each other. And you know, that was I think that's been great for the Ireland as a sport to grow. It was the Ironman's initiation. It was the Ireland for the year of sport in '85 that it was launched, and it all was just a one-off initially. And Noel Kringle and Jeffrey Corlett, they were the two people. Noel Kringle was the MHK at the time. I suppose really Noel he had a sporting background, and he and Jeff were also quite friendly, and they are the ones that instigated it. And people have them to thank for what has become an international event.
Oh, I mean, it is amazing because for, let's call ourselves club athletes, it's the pinnacle you could. So I'm sure it keeps people in sport because it's something to aspire to.
Yeah.
That's, quote, international, but isn't, you know, you can do almost as most people are. It's a hobby, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it will keep people involved in sport and interacting in sport.
Well, I can still picture that day. That's 30 years ago this year. That's 95. We were in Gibraltar for that, and we stayed in the army barracks. And I can remember the first time I'd ever used a laptop, and it was a bit agricultural, really. It was quite heavy. I remember I was struggling with it and trying to get stuff back, and I was working in a hotel in the press centre in the hotel, and I remember you guys riding up the rock, basically in what was a time trial up the rock, and yourself, Tony Barley, Richard Fletcher,
Keane Quayle, wasn't it?
Keane, and you were absolutely exhausted when you got to the top. It was a really steep climb, probably only about a mile and a half, I would have thought, but it was pretty severe.
You'll I'm sure you remember the guy's name, and we got silver that day, and I always by 1 second, and I always remember because it was the third person across the lines time counted.
Yeah,
and I was the third person. Richard Fletcher did the flat, and then I was the youngest and by far the least experienced there. But there was a fellow on the football team who was one of the coaches, and he went. Did he coach at Man City as well for a while? What was
Richard Hodgson.
And I remember the last stretch. I mean, it was all steep, but him running next to me and absolutely screaming at me for the last 300 yards or 200 yards, and that's the only reason we got that silver medal. Was I remember him screaming and screaming at me. Yeah, I don't think I've probably spoken to him since that day. But.
Yeah, he did. He was a role at Manchester City. Yeah, he was the football director here for quite some sports director as well at NSC. But the footballers didn't endear themselves that much.
They had a few problems, if I recall.
Didn't go down too well.
They
spent more time on the bars. They did. They got knocked out in the qualifying stages. But you know what? It was all good fun.
Yeah, all learning.
I mean, it was an amazing place to go to. I went to literally we flew into Gibraltar last year just to go on holidays to Spain, and first time we've been back, and it's very built up now by comparison. But I went to quite a few Ireland games and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was always hard work. I think people thought you'd go on a holiday. But
you'd be running from event to event.
It was tough going. I went to many places, Rhodes in Greece. So I went to Åland, or spelt Åland, in Finland, Gotland in Sweden, all islands off the coast, and then Jersey, Guernsey, Shetland Islands. So I went to quite a few over the years. And
take you to Bahamas. Was it Bahamas?
I didn't go there. It was Bermuda.
Bermuda, sorry.
I didn't go to that one, no. But I think it was very expensive, actually.
The budget didn't stretch.
No, it didn't stretch, no. But I always felt part of the team then, because there were, apart from, it was obviously Jeff Cannell then was working for Manx Radio, and he was there covering it for the radio, myself for the papers. And it was a really interesting week. I mean, Guernsey in 2006 was the very week that Cav won his first international race. And on the line, it was the crit around the quayside, a bit like Douglas Quay, actually, in St. Peter Port. And came around, and Cav, big Jersey rider, and his name escapes me right now. And Sam Furby, Sam Furby,
maybe.
I think it was. And Sam was a big lad, and he'd come to the line and sprinted, and he thought he raised his arms to salute and the win. And Cav thought, "You're not beating me, mate," and he ducked under his arm and came out the other side. And he was 16, I think. Cav, he was 16 was the limit for that. You had to be 16.
Yeah, he did.
And Cav came in as a 16-year-old, and he won, and it was his first international win. I was fortunate enough to get the picture as he crossed the line.
Yeah, I've seen
Sam
that.
Furby.
Sam
Furby.
Yeah.
And Cav got it. And
probably softer hit for Sam now, having seen what Cav went on to do. I'm sure it was a hard hit at the time.
Yeah, it was a hard hit. But I mean, Elliot Baxter was in that team, and he had a phenomenal week because Elliot won. He won all the mountain bike events, the crit and the cross country event, which was on another island. Actually, it was I can't remember the other island now. So we went to that on the launch on a motorboat, like, and but then it came to the road race, and Guernsey's a funny place. It's quite small, but it's quite hilly in places, and this was quite a hilly little course out to the west coast, and Elliot wasn't marked because he was a mountain bike rider. They weren't, thinking, it was Roche really. Roche was the man. And they were all watching him, and Elliot got away off the front, and it was quite. I remember finishing, and it was quite dark, and Elliot got away, and they didn't mark him, and they just lost him, and came to the last lap, and he was too strong on the hills; they couldn't get him back, and he won it. So he actually came away with 3 outright wins.
Impressive.
So he won the road race on tarmac, obviously, and he won both the gold medals in mountain bikes. But then he would have had team medals as well. He came back with a hatful of medals, and he was the Isle of Man's most, prolific.
Yeah, he's got a lot of.
Elliot was a great rider, and well respected. And Elliot Baxter is one of those guys, had a lot of success, but such a gentleman as well. Absolute star, a bit like Connor Cummins, really, in respect. A big man, quiet in his own way, very understated. Very similar characters actually. And
I compared to Mark Christian as well.
Yeah, Mark Christian, absolutely.
Quiet guy, super talented.
Modest, unassuming, and I always have a soft spot for people like that. They don't blow their own trumpet, but they just get on with it. And
get the results.
Yeah, they get the results. Yeah.
So it's $1 million question in this very cold room. Is if you got one memory that you would want to chat about from watching sport on the Isle of Man, or even doing it yourself, what would that be? That one abiding of real pride and joy of watching it or reporting on it.
It's hard to say on one, really.
That's why I said one.
I've had a few. I remember I saw him a few weeks ago, Martin Aram. And Martin was a high jumper, and at the Commonwealth Games in Manchester 2002. And on the night, Martin became the first Manx person in athletics to get to a final. And he was competing in the final. And we were in what is now Manchester City's ground at the Emirates, And that was only just being constructed in time for the Games in 2002. And Martin, he was the only high jumper we had competing, and he was competing against good standard of people. And he was trying to get from memory 2.6 meters or something like that high jump, and I can't remember the exact height. And we were out in the middle, and I was there because I had a pass, obviously, to go. I was out in the middle of the arena. And Martin was really nervous because he was going for a PB, and he'd come back and he'd chat to me because he was so nervous, I think, and he thought he had a chance. So he qualified, and he became the first Manx person to qualify for a final in athletics in the Isle of Man's history. And it was an amazing night, and they also had a big screen. A huge screen, which are commonplace now, but at the time were quite new. And Martin was, I got the photograph of Martin jumping in real life, but I got him silhouetted in the screen above. And when I sent the pictures back to the to the paper. It was I was the first person, or one of the first people in the Isle of Man to use a digital 35mm camera. So again,
you did like new technology.
Yeah, I know, but it had to be handheld half the time. But I remember sending the photograph back, and I said to my colleague, Richard Parslow at the time, I said to him, I think I'll make a front page for you, because it's Martin last night competing in it. And the sub who subbed the page, he was not sports orientated whatsoever. Uh-huh. He put the picture on the page and chopped the picture, or chopped the image of him in the screen off the picture, off the one that went in the paper. And then Richard luckily had the foresight to go to him and say, listen, mate, that's not what he sent. He sent that because it's the picture in duplicate. And he goes, oh, I didn't realise that. So anyway, you had to change the front page picture, but it went in. That's would be one of the ones. But I mean, there's many others. I mean, the Mark Cavendish moment in Guernsey was quite a moment, because we all kind of knew that this guy was something a bit special. And then I was fortunate enough to be in Paris 2 or 3 occasions when he won on Champs-Élysées, certainly twice when he won. And that was a very, very proud moment. Other ones would include, for sure, Dave Molyneux. Dave Molyneux's been a friend, since he first rode at 16, and he's 52 now. 62, I should say, just. And when he won his first TT and went on to win many TTs, 17 in all, I could never, it's such a feeling. And that feeling is coming back with the Crow brothers. Their father was successful as well, but to have two brothers competing at their level, again, very modest, very unassuming guys, have a lot of time for them, and they have done so well. Connor Cummins, I mentioned Connor before. He's never won a race at TT. I'd like to think he still could, but he's also a gentleman and a great sportsman, and I have a lot of respect for him. Many, many others over the years. And when any of those ever done well, cycling-wise, full of admiration for them. But any Manx person competing at an international level, I get such pride, from what they've achieved. And I've probably missed out any amount of people here.
Well,
and I say, you never mentioned so-and-so, you never mentioned so-and-so. And the list is endless, it really is. I mean, the rally boys as well, I was pretty pally with all them. And to see them winning international events and competing in world rallies and that, was amazing.
We holiday, wife and I holiday in New England, and there's a mountain there called Mount Washington. Mm-hmm. And we were there. He doesn't hold the record anymore, but Mark Higgins held the record for driving up that. Yeah, I don't know, maybe back in 2000 broke the record for rallying up that. Because I remember we were just up there, and there was a placard or something up there, and we were like, "Oh, it's a Manxie." Us Manxies get everywhere, don't we? But it was like, "Oh, it's a Manxie got a record here."
Well, the worst thing with Mark was, yes, he was. I was quite pally with Mark, and he was doing a lot of the stunts for the James Bond movies, but we couldn't report it.
Oh, okay.
I knew what he was doing at the time, but he couldn't. He would say, "Oh, I can't say what he can't. Can't release it. Can't say." And he did virtually all Daniel Craig's stunts in the cars.
Oh, really?
For that period, yeah.
Okay.
But amazing. So there's many things like that. But I mean, to be witness at an event, whether it's TT or whether it's international Commonwealth Games or that's been the most pride.
Not getting that in Norfolk, boy.
It's fly fishing. Yeah. So I've been lucky. My career has covered an amazing period in history of Manx sport, really. And I'm just very, very honoured to be a small part of that.
Yeah, well, you helped promote that, didn't you? You're part of that journey for sure.
Yeah. It's been great, and maybe the MBE was the final thing, the final piece of the jigsaw, really, and I've been very proud to receive that as well.
Well, thank you for all your.
You haven't asked me about my career, and I thought you were going to ask me. You said
you're retiring. That's your career.
My career in sport has been very modest, and although I've competed and still compete.
What are you competing in at the moment?
Well, tomorrow I'm doing the New Year's Day run, fell race, but
that's part of, I suppose, it helps almost the journalism. I guess is diving into
Grand Fondo's a good example because I knew you get into these things and you think, well, if I can do it, but then I get round, I'd never be a winner. but I was just proud to finish,
Yeah.
and my goal was always just to finish.
Yeah.
And that's always been a thing with me. Right from the very first big event I did as a 16-year-old on a motorbike was a tough day out on a very uncompetitive machine. I got round, and that was always the thing. And I always like to think that, it's not the winning, it's the competing, it's the taking part. And that was what I always enjoyed.
And I imagine going back to the comment you made earlier about the Isle of Man being such a popular sport, so many clubs, there's obviously that we've got a lot of people, because there's only ultimately one winner anyway, but there's a lot of people just want to participate and be involved. I don't mean to see it doing a little bit of running. You see it running events like the Fell Run tomorrow, there'll be hundreds of people doing that, wouldn't there?
There's over 250. There's 269, I think. Entries is amazing. Yeah, so it's very popular. Tomorrow's a bit of fun, but it is just quite a challenge.
Not for the top 10. There won't be fun, will there? They're all racing each other.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bob.
Like I say, I'm sure we could deep dive for hours. Appreciate it. It's about -40 in here. So thank you for your time, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the jacket.
No worries. It's a word out from Martin.
Cheers, boy. Thank you.
Poor flimsy humans. Don't you wish you were flawless like me? A towering inferno of physical perfection?
I hate to pop your blimp-like ego, but you're not perfect.